If there's one thing you have to say about Pirates of the Caribbean, it's that there's never a shortage of characters. It is plentiful in both its heroes and villains, and there's a big reason to why it was successful to begin with. Like the marvel of the age of piracy, if you could call that that. We have covered our fair share of heroes and villains, but not the final piece of the original trio yet, with characters like Elizabeth Swann. Because Elizabeth is a very important character in Pirates. She is the only main character who is not born into nor connected to piracy in any way until the events of the first film. She is the bridge between civilization and the pirate's life, and she chooses to enter both for the sake of her survival. Her father, of course, is Governor of Port Royal, fully part of the British Empire's vast naval presence in the Caribbean, and takes into that perspective. I know beforehand we did put emphasis on Will Turner as the bridge and point of view for the audience into the pirate's world, but Elizabeth stands more as the outsider who gets more and more involved as time goes on, to the high point of her becoming known as the Pirate King after the events of the third film. And that is such a high honor that few have ever held, and shows that her ability to hold her own in this massive franchise cannot go unnoticed. I mean, if you were to tell people back when Curse of the Black Pearl came out that she would eventually lead the pirates as Pirate King, you would have been called crazy. Her image in the original looked more like a princess or someone of noble status, and not a rough-edged pirate, where this is more important than those like Jack, who remain to be the same scallywags they always were. Where the evolution of characters who were never involved into a world to begin with is probably the core of what made Pirates so transformative, and that is what I seek to talk about today, and how Elizabeth became such a notable character on her own in the age of piracy. And now, let's go back to Curse of the Black Pearl and what Elizabeth actually does. From the very first scene, she's already different. As a young girl sailing into Port Royal, she's the one singing a pirate shanty, the one who spots Will Turner floating in the wreckage, and the one who quietly takes the gold medallion off of Will's neck so no one can mark him as a pirate. That little act of protection sets everything in motion, even if she doesn't know it yet. And so 8 years later, she's still holding on to that same medallion, still fascinated by the pirate world her father in Norrington kept telling her is pure evil. When the story properly begins, Elizabeth is stuck in the role that society gave her, the governor's daughter, corseted, proper, and expected to accept Commodore Norrington's proposal. Of course, she doesn't want to. The tight corset literally makes her faint into the bay, and it's Jack Sparrow who pulls her out from that. From this moment, the civilized world starts cracking around her. When the Black Pearl attacks Port Royal, she doesn't just freeze, she hides the medallion and then bargains with Barbossa using it, and even giving the false pretense that she's Elizabeth Turner to protect herself, and without realizing it, even tying her tighter to Will's bloodline and the curse. Aboard the Black Pearl, she's not just a damsel, she stands up straight to Barbossa and learns the truth about the cursed crew under the moonlight, and refuses to break. When she's later marooned with Jack, she's the one who builds the signal fire that brings Norrington's fleet, and when she needs to save Will, she does something calculated and ruthless. She accepts Norrington's proposal on the condition that they go after him. It's a move that shows she's already learning how to play the game, using the rules of the civilized world to serve her own ends. And by the final battle on Isla de Muerta, Elizabeth is no longer waiting to be rescued. She frees Jack's crew even if they immediately abandoned her, and then fight alongside Will and Jack against the cursed pirates. She helps lift the curse, stands up for Jack at his almost execution with Will, and finally choosing Turner over the safe, respectable life of Norrington. In one film, she goes from a girl who only dreamed of pirates to someone who has bargained with them, survived them, and outmaneuvered them, walking away having chosen the more dangerous path for herself. And that's the foundation. Everything that comes later, her deeper involvement, her sacrifices, her rise as Pirate King, starts right here, with a young woman who refused to stay in the role she was born into. So when you look at her in this film, she's never really the wide-eyed innocent some people actually paint her as. She's actually strong-minded from the start as a kid. She knows the rules of her world, with the proposals, the expectations of a governor's daughter, and already pushes against them. She's not naive about power, status, or danger. She understands that pirates are a threat, and that her father and Norrington represent order, and that choosing anything outside the order comes with consequences. What she doesn't fully understand is the supernatural side of the world. When Barbossa and his crew reveal themselves as undead under the moonlight, you can see that it terrifies her. The curse is something she can't reason or negotiate with the same way she negotiates with living men or deals with them. That terror is honest and honestly makes her more human and not weaker. But the fear actually never stops her from fighting. She doesn't collapse or wait for someone to solve the problem. She bargains with Barbossa using the medallion up to the point where they don't get healed by the curse using her, and lies about her name, standing her ground even when the crew turns skeletal around her. Later, when she's marooned with Jack, she takes action building the fire that brings help, and when the final confrontation comes, she refuses to stay on the sidelines. She fights, not with the skill of a trained swordsman yet, but with the same stubborn will that have defined her the entire film. What really matters in this movie is the choice she makes about who she wants to be. On one one side stands everything she was raised for: Norrington's proposal, her father's protection, the safety and respectability of Port Royal, where on the other side is Will and Jack, the messy, dangerous, and outside the law, where she sides with them. It's not about just romance or adventures for adventure's sake, it's her deciding that the life she was told to want is not the life she actually wants. She rejects the safe path and chooses the blacksmith over the Commodore, helping a pirate escape the gallows, where in that moment Elizabeth stops being only the governor's daughter and starts becoming someone who will be stepping further into the pirate world, no matter how terrified or unprepared she feels. And when you get to Dead Man's Chest, this is where you really see Elizabeth's development start to really show how far she's come. In the first film, she was still reacting, kidnapped, bargaining, and surviving, then choosing. Where in the second film, she's no longer reacting, she's acting. 1 year later, she's on the verge of marrying Will, but then the future is ripped away the second Cutler Beckett comes in and arrests them both for helping Jack escape. That safe life she could have gone back to is now gone. She's now a wanted criminal, and instead of waiting for someone else to fix it, she takes control. She escapes prison on her own with her help from her father and confronts Beckett directly, forces his hand, and then sets out to find Will herself. This is a major shift. The girl who once needed rescuing is now the one who's making the moves. What's different about her in this film is the hardness that starts to form. She's still the same strong-minded person, still loyal, still capable of deep feeling, but the world has stopped giving her clean choices. When she reaches Tortuga and finds Jack, she doesn't hesitate to knock out Norrington cold to protect him. When the situation with the Dead Man's Chest turns chaotic, she adapts, and then comes the moment that defines her in the film, where she realizes the Kraken is coming for Jack alone, where she distracts him with a kiss, handcuffs him to the mast, and lets the others escape while he is dragged under. It is calculated, cold, and it works. That decision shows how much she has changed. In Curse of the Black Pearl, she fought for survival and for the people she loved. In Dead Man's Chest, she is willing to sacrifice one of them to save the rest. The guilt hits her hard afterward, of course. She doesn't shrug it off, but she is the one who still made the call. That weight is new. So is the way the people around her start to look at her differently. Will sees the kiss and doubts her, and Jack is gone because of her. The pirate world is no longer something she's visiting, it's something she's actively shaping herself and is changing her in return. And by the end of the second film, she's no longer the outsider who stepped into the pirate's life. She is someone who's already paid a real price to stay in it, and one who's ready to go even farther to fix what she broke. Elizabeth's choices in Dead Man's Chest are difficult, cold, and completely pragmatic for the situation she's in. There's no clean way out anymore, and she stops pretending there is. The film does open with her already in prison alongside Will, their wedding destroyed by Beckett, where her father tries to help her escape but the plan falls apart. What happens next, again as we said, is that she doesn't want to be saved and turns the situation around and puts a gun to Beckett's head straight forth and forces him to negotiate. She walks out of this confrontation with the letters in her hand, not because anyone handed her a victory, but because she took it. Then she does something even more telling, dresses as a sailor and stows away on a merchant ship to get out to Port Royal and go to Will. The governor's daughter in this sequence is gone, and what is left is someone willing to erase their own identity just to keep moving. That same pragmatic streak carries all the way to the end of the film when the Kraken comes, where she sees the truth faster than anyone else and allows him to die, and chooses the lesser loss and lives with the weight of it immediately after. That this is the through line of her entire arc in the film. From the prison cell to the gun to Beckett's face, from disguising herself as a common sailor to sacrificing Jack Sparrow, every major decision she makes is hard, calculated, and necessary. She's no longer just surviving the pirate world, she's making the kinds of choices that define it. And when we go to World's End in the first half, we find Elizabeth being colder, sharper, and more determined than she's ever been. The guilt from relieving Jack to the Kraken has settled something into her harder. She doesn't talk about it easily and doesn't ask for comfort, just keeps moving on with the task at hand. And when the group sets out to bring Jack Sparrow back from Davy Jones' locker, Elizabeth is already carrying the weight the others can't fully see. She's distant with Will, where that easy trust they once had is strained. And when she finally tells him the truth, that she was one who chained Jack to the mast, it lands like a wound. She doesn't soften it, she owns that completely. And that honesty cost her, but she refuses to hide behind excuses anymore. The journey only deepens the edge. By the time they reach the locker, Elizabeth is operating with focused intensity, and then the moment that locks into place is where she finds out her father is dead, killed on Beckett's orders. Where the news doesn't break her, it hardens her resolve. This grief turns into a grievance, and grievance turns into vengeance and purpose. From then on out, her decisions carried a colder clarity. She no longer is trying to survive or fix a mistake, she's moving on with the quiet fury of someone who's lost too much and is done than letting other people decide the cost. Again, the first half is just as much about Elizabeth's relationships as it is about the journey to the locker. The colder, more determined edge she carries doesn't exist in a vacuum, it's shaped by the people closest to her and by what those relationships cost. With Will, the tension is immediate and heavy. The easy partnership they once had in the first film is gone. Elizabeth keeps her distance, considering that Will is more on the search for his father. She barely looks at him in the same way, and when she finally tells him the truth, the confession doesn't bring them closer. It drives a wedge deeper. Will's response is quiet but cutting. She chooses not to tell them. That moment lays bare of how much that last film changed her. She no longer is the woman who shared everything with him without calculation. She made a hard choice, carried it alone, and now has to live with that fact despite the man she loves now seeing her differently because of it. Their relationship in these early stretches is defined by silence and guilt, and the slow realization that loving each other might not be enough to keep the trust intact. But how do they have to weather it till world's end? And then again, there is her father. Weatherby Swan has always represented the last real tie Elizabeth had to the life she was born into, the governor's daughter, the protected girl, and the version of herself that still belonged to Port Royal. When she finds him among the dead in Davy Jones' locker when he reveals himself, that tie is severed for good. The way the scene plays out is quiet and devastating. She sees him, tries to reach for the connection, and then understands what it means with heartbreak. He is gone, killed on Beckett's orders, where that loss doesn't hurt her, it sharpens her into hardened vengeance. That grief turns into something colder and more focused on Beckett. From that moment on, her fight against Beckett is no longer about survival or loyalty to the others, it becomes personal. Her father's death gives a grievance that sits underneath every decision she makes for the rest of the film, and Norrington is more distant in the first half, but his presence still lingers in the background of who Elizabeth has become. He was once the safe, respectable future her father wanted for her, but by now that path is long gone, and the man himself is a broken shadow of what he used to be. The fact that she has barely room to think about him anymore says as much about her transformation as anything else. The people who once defined her, her father, the Commodore, the expectations of civilization, are either dead, ruined, or left behind. And what remains is Will, the guilt between them, and the growing hardness that will carry her into the second half of the story, as people like Norrington die to sacrifice himself for her. And after Norrington's death, Elizabeth's past hardened even further. His sacrifice gets her and the remaining crew off the Flying Dutchman, but there's no time to process it. She's immediately thrown into the next stage of the journey, one that will complete their transformation that began in Port Royal. Again, earlier in the film, before she joined the Dutchman, when Sao Feng, believing she is Calypso, is mortally wounded, he makes a dying decision that changes everything. He names Elizabeth the captain of the Empress and passing her to the Piece of Eight, making her the pirate lord of the South China Seas. It is sudden, almost absurd given where she started, but she does not shrink from it. She accepts the title, takes command of the crew, and walks into the Brethren Court as one of the 9 pirate lords. The governor's daughter is now sitting at the table of the most powerful pirates in the world, something that never could have been expected 3 films ago. And what happens next is the clearest measure of how far she has come. The pirate lords, deadlocked, each voting for themselves as tradition demands, is where Jack Sparrow breaks it. He votes for Elizabeth out of his own choice, where with that single vote, she becomes Pirate King, the first in generations to come and one of the few to ever hold the title. It is not a ceremonial honor, it comes with real power and real responsibility. As Pirate King, she is the one who can declare war, and she does. She looks at the assembled lords, at the threat of Beckett and the East India Trading Company, and refuses to hide in Shipwreck Cove, where she chooses to fight. That decision is a full circle moment. In The Curse of Black Pearl, she was the outsider, the girl in the corset that had to be pulled from the water and bargained for her life. But by the end of World's End, she is the one who's giving orders. She stands in front of the gathered pirates and delivers the speech that sends them into full battle against Beckett's armada. The same woman who once needed protecting is now the leader willing to risk everything to stop the force that has taken so much from them. It is a remarkable change where Elizabeth does not become Pirate King by accident or by someone else's design alone. She earns that position through every hard choice, every loss, and every refusal to go back to the life she was born into. By the time she leads the pirates into war, the transformation is complete. The bridge between civilization and piracy is now fully crossed onto the other side, and she is the one standing in the front. The final battle is also where everything Elizabeth has become is put to the test, where Elizabeth does not hang back. She fights through it at all in the first place. Also in the middle of that chaos comes one of the most unlikely and perfect moments in the entire trilogy. Will proposes and they are married by Barbossa while the battle still rages. It is rushed, desperate, and completely sincere. There's no church, no ceremony, no safety, just two people who love each other choosing to bind themselves together while everything is falling apart and they're fighting people who look like squid. It is the most epic wedding the franchise could ever have given them, and it fits who both have become. Then of course the cost arrives. Will is mortally wounded by Davy Jones, where in order to save them, the only path for them to go forward is the one that takes him away from her. He must stab Jones's heart and take his place in order for him to live. And it's one Elizabeth has a hard time to watch, since she just married the man and now he's being pulled in a fate that will keep them apart for a decade at a time. That grief is raw, where she has fought, led, and sacrificed to reach this point, and the victory still demands another loss. She does not break in front of everyone, but the weight of it is clear. She has won the war, but has lost the ordinary future she might have wanted. And after the battle, she makes the biggest choice ever. She steps away from the life of the Pirate King. She does not choose to stay or rule or chase further glory, she instead just goes ashore, carrying Will's heart, and waits. Their one day together before he must leave is quiet and heavy, with everything left unsaid. She is left with the knowledge that she will only see him once every 10 years, where the burden settles on her as the final price of the path she chooses. The girl who once dreamed of pirates now becomes the woman who led them, loved through a maelstrom, and then had to quietly accept a quiet her life defined by the absence and waiting. It is a bittersweet end to her journey in the trilogy, one that feels earned. She got the freedom she fought for, the love she chose, and the leadership she rose to, but none of them came without cost. And the final image of her standing on that shore, knowing the years she will have to endure without them, makes the victory feel complete and painfully human at the same time. In the end, Elizabeth stands as the most strong-minded character in Pirates of the Caribbean. She is resolute in her beliefs and fights to the very end of what she holds true. From the moment she first stepped back into the pirate world, she refused to be defined by the roles other people tried to give to her, the governor's daughter, proper lady, damsel, or even just Will Turner's love. She chose again and again to become something else, and earned the title Pirate King not through birthright or clever maneuvering alone, but through sheer courage in the face of every pirate and every royal soldier who stood against her. And then, just as importantly, she also knew when to stop. After the war was won and the cost has been paid, Elizabeth did not cling to power or further chase legend. She stepped away, chose to quiet her life, raising her son, and carrying the weight of years that she would have to spend to wait for Will. That decision is defined as any battle she fought. The heart of this franchise has always been about choosing who you will be and knowing when the fight is over. And Elizabeth lives that truth more completely than anyone else in that franchise, and even Jack. She began as the outsider looking in on the age of piracy and ended up as someone who shaped it, survived it, and walked away on her own terms. That is why she remains one of the most compelling figures in the entire story. Not because she became a pirate, but because she decided at every turn who exactly Elizabeth Swann would be. That of course, a pirate's life for her. I'm all done. Goodbye.